23rd century space travelers trapped in a medieval castle while William Campbell camps it up? What's not to love about this? This is a review of the Star Trek The Original Series episode, The Squire of Gothos. If you have not seen this episode and you don't want to know if Uhura can play the harpsichord, be warned. Spoilers beyond this point. It's another one of those episodes where the crew of the Enterprise is carrying out their mission, minding their own business, when all of a sudden, bang, shenanigans. While crossing a stellar void where there aren't supposed to be any planets, Spock detects a planet. Kirk's like, well, we don't have time to check it out now. We're on a very important mission to someplace else. Sulu, steer us around it, and let's be on our way. But Sulu stands up and grabs his tummy. Kirk's like, if you're gonna puke, aim it away from the highly explosive control panel. But instead of puking, Sulu just disappears. Kirk's like, oh, thank God. Wait, that's bad too. He runs over to Sulu's station, but then he disappears. Spock calls a red alert. The Enterprise moves into orbit around that planet that's not supposed to be there, but after many hours of scanning its surface, the crew still can't locate Kirk or Sulu. The planet seems incapable of supporting life. Its atmosphere is toxic and turbulent. There's constant volcanic activity. It sounds worse than Florida. But then Uhura says, hey, Spock, come look at this. Spock walks over to see what she's talking about, and there is a text message on one of the side view screens. Greetings and felicitations. Spock's like, text back, new phone, who dis? And the view screen answers with, hip hip hurrah, tally ho! Uhura's like, I don't know what the hell that's about, but I traced the call if you want to beam down there and smack around whoever it is. Scotty's like, I volunteered to join the smacking around party, but Spock says, what do I look like? Captain Kirk? I'm not sending all the important people we have left down there. Scotty, you're staying here. I'm sure as hell staying here. DeSalle, nobody cares about you. You go. And you, blue shirt guy, I've never seen you before in my life. You go too. And I guess I need to send one that people will give a shit about. So, Dr. McCoy. McCoy, DeSalle, and Yeager, the blue shirt, beam down to the location where Uhura traced the signal that sent those text messages, and they find that conditions aren't nearly as bad as they looked from up in space. They brought oxygen masks, but they don't need them. The air is breathable and calm. There are trees, and oh hey, look at that cool castle! They enter the castle, and it's decked out in all the typical castle stuff, tapestries, suits of armor, stuffed salt vampires, you know. Kirk and Sulu are on display here as well, trying to stand still like they lost a game of freeze tag. Music starts playing, and the landing party turns to see this guy sitting at the harpsichord. He says, oh, I guess you'll want me to unfreeze your friends. Very well. And he waves his hand, and Kirk and Sulu come back to life. The guy at the harpsichord introduces himself as Trelane, General Trelane, retired, and welcomes the crew to the planet Gothos and his island of peace in the midst of its storms. He apologizes for bringing them here the way he did, but when he saw the ship passing by, he just couldn't resist. See, he's been observing planet Earth for quite some time. It's kind of become his hobby. But Trelane is confused. According to my observations, people on your planet shouldn't be capable of traveling in space. Yeager observes how out of date with modern Earth the style of the castle looks to be, and figures that Trelane has been looking at Earth through some kind of fancy telescope. Since this planet is about 900 light years from Earth, Trelane has been observing the Earth of centuries past. Trelane's like, oops, oh well, I was just trying to make you feel at home. The landing party notices that they've been cut off from communicating with the Enterprise. Kirk's like, Trelane, why have you taken us prisoner? Trelane says, I haven't taken you prisoner. I just want to hear all about your stories of war and murder, fun stuff like that. As Trelane talks, he turns away from them. DeSalle tries to sneak up on him with a phaser, but this doesn't work because DeSalle is a dipshit who doesn't understand that A, he could just shoot Trelane with his phaser from where he was already standing, and B, Trelane is directly in front of a huge mirror through which he can see DeSalle advancing on him. Trelane freezes DeSalle and takes his phaser and uses it to disintegrate a few things around the room before Kirk steps up and snatches the phaser back and announces that they are leaving. Trelane's like, you want to leave? Okay. And he teleports Kirk out into the stormy atmosphere on the planet and leaves him to choke for a few seconds before bringing him back. That'll teach him. While they hang out with Trelane, the members of the landing party start to notice things about Trelane's castle. The fire in the fireplace doesn't put out any heat, and Trelane himself doesn't register at all on McCoy's medical scan. It's like he doesn't exist at all. Still, Kirk figures, if the fire only looks like a fire and he recreated the wrong time period of Earth without realizing it, that means Trelane isn't all-knowing and all-powerful. Kirk says to Trelane, "Hey, man, this is fun and all, but we need to get back to our ship." Trelane's like, "Nah, I don't think so." Kirk says, "Look, you can't just use us as playthings to satisfy your childish whims. Who do you think you are, the showrunner of Star Trek Picard?" McCoy gets a signal from the Enterprise. Spock and Scotty have figured out a way to break through Trelane's interference. Kirk's like, "Beam us up! Later, Trelane, you loser!" They get back to the Enterprise and Kirk's like, "Step on the gas, get us the hell out of here." But Trelane appears on the bridge and says, not so fast. Nobody pulls an Irish exit on me. I hate the Irish." Trelane teleports everyone back to his castle. Now, in addition to Kirk, Sulu, McCoy, DeSalle, and Yeager, who were here before, Spock, Uhura, and Yeoman Ross have been brought along as well. Trelane introduces himself to the ladies. He tells Uhura to play some music while he and Ross have a dance. Uhura says, "I can't play the harpsichord." Trelane says, "Sure you can," and he puts a harpsichord playing whammy on her, and she starts playing while Trelane and Ross dance. A feast has been laid out on the table, but McCoy isn't impressed. The food, the wine, it all tastes like nothing, no flavor at all. Spock says it indicates that Trelane knows the forms of things from Earth, but not the substance. Kirk reasons that if Trelane is fallible and therefore not all-powerful, he must have some hidden device generating the power he uses to create and control things. They notice that Trelane never seems to get very far from that big mirror. Kirk gets an idea, and he walks up and interrupts the dance between Trelane and Ross, who Trelane has outfitted in a fancy dress. Kirk pulls Ross away and gets in Trelane's face like, "I don't want you dancing with her. I don't want you giving gifts to her. I don't want you putting your hands on her." And he slaps Trelane in the face. This delights Trelane, who immediately goes and gets his dueling pistols. "It's an affair of honor," he says. "We'll duel for the hand of the lady, but I warn you, Captain, I never miss." Like my pistols, by the way? They're exactly like the pair used in the duel that killed Alexander Hamilton. "The challenge demands satisfaction. If they apologize, no need for further action." Is Hamilton still a thing? Are we still doing that? Kirk and Trelane take their pistols and face off for the duel. Trelane insists on shooting first, but he fires his pistol in the air like Hamilton's chump son. Ask Philip how effective that strategy is, Trelane. When it's Kirk's turn, he shoots out the mirror, revealing the machinery Trelane's been using to work his magic behind the glass. With Trelane's power temporarily interrupted, Kirk and the others beam back to the Enterprise and fly away from Gothos as fast as they can. But suddenly, Gothos appears directly in front of them. Sulu flies past it, but there it is again. And again. Kirk says, "To hell with this. Take us into orbit. I'm beaming down to settle this bullshit once and for all. Give me an hour, Spock, and if you don't hear from me, get the Enterprise out of here." Returning to Gothos, Kirk finds himself in a courtroom setting, with Trelane presiding as the judge. Trelane's like, "Did you really think the machine behind the mirror was my only machine? I got machines all over the place, man. I've even got a hanging machine that I've just been itching to try out." Kirk says, "Before you hang me, can I tell you what a bumbling, clueless clod you are? You'd have a lot more fun killing me if you gave me a sporting chance." Trelane agrees to let Kirk go hide in the forest, and Kirk takes off, though he keeps stopping and trying to call the Enterprise so he can tell it to get away. He gets back only static. Trelane appears, wielding a sword, and slashes at Kirk, but misses. Trelane chases Kirk through the woods and back up to the front door of the castle, where he traps Kirk with iron bars on either side. Trelane orders Kirk to his knees, but Kirk says, "I ain't going out like that." And he grabs away Trelane's sword and snaps it in half. Trelane's like, "Hey, that was my stabbing sword, not my breaking sword." Kirk slaps him. Trelane says, "Hey, slapping me is cheating. I'll show you, you cheater." But before Trelane can do anything else, two green lights appear overhead and begin speaking to Trelane. He steps into a spotlight they've shined on the ground, and it soon becomes obvious that those two green lights are Trelane's parents. They scold him for playing too rough with his pets. Trelane protests, petulantly insisting that he can do whatever he wants, that this is his planet, that he wasn't done playing, that they never let him have any fun. His parents are like, whatever, come in and get washed up, and maybe you can look through your telescope some more before bed. The Second Anglo-Dutch War just started, I bet you'll like that. The whining Trelane fades away, and his parents apologize to Captain Kirk for any trouble he caused. Later, back on the Enterprise, Kirk says to Spock, "You know, that Trelane, he was just misbehaving the way all children do, I suppose. Spock, I bet even you were an ornery child. You probably stole apples from your neighbor's trees and dipped little girls' pigtails in inkwells, didn't you?" Spock's like, "No, I spent my childhood being relentlessly bullied for being biracial." Oh. Well, anyway, kids, am I right? The end. Good old Trelane. Or bad young Trelane, I guess. Either way, I've always liked this episode. It suffers from some of the same shortcomings that afflicted many classic Trek episodes, but ultimately it mostly works thanks to the characters and the performances and the tone of sinister whimsy that runs through the whole thing. As far as those shortcomings go, the big one, as is often the case with classic Trek, is the pacing. For whatever reason, the writers of Star Trek frequently seemed to have trouble filling an entire hour, and as a result, episodes had a tendency to drag or to repeat themselves. The Squire of Gothos does both. Despite a fairly simple setup, Enterprise runs across a planet that's not supposed to be there, Kirk and Sulu disappear, landing party beams down to look for them, we're nearly 10 minutes deep into the episode before Trelane makes his first appearance. Then, most of that first encounter is taken up with prolonged introductions and explanations. Trelane doesn't really do anything else until Kirk and the others beam up, and Trelane appears on the Enterprise and zaps them back to his castle, and by that point, the episode is nearly half over. It's not unpleasant, the episode is watchable throughout, but it's hard to miss the fact that, for quite a bit of it, nothing's really happening. It's also repetitive in small ways and large ways. The small way has to do with Kirk and the others figuring out that Trelane has limitations. The first time, Yeager notices that the fire isn't putting out heat, and also that Trelane didn't realize his castle was 900 years behind the times for Earth, and Kirk says, aha, he makes mistakes, so he isn't all-powerful. Then, later, McCoy comments on how bland the food is. Spock observes that Trelane is capable of recreating only form, not substance, and Kirk says, aha, he makes mistakes, so he isn't all-powerful. We get two minor variations of the same essential scene. The large way in which the episode is repetitive has to do with its structure. They go down to the planet, they encounter Trelane, they leave, Trelane sends them back down to the planet, they leave, Trelane keeps them from escaping, Kirk goes back down to the planet. Each visit to Gothos is a little different, especially the last one where it's just Kirk and Trelane, so that helps, but the plot still feels an awful lot like a carousel ride. Still, carousel rides are fun, and that's what the Squire of Gothos mostly is despite its flaws. Fun. William Campbell is clearly having a great time playing Trelane, and it's infectious. It's hard to not have a great time watching him as well. Even before the truth about his character is revealed, Campbell makes it obvious through his performance that Trelane's Lord of the Manor routine is all an act, and a poorly researched one at that. Campbell plays Trelane as someone who is trying to come across as knowledgeable and in charge, but who is actually doing most of this stuff for the first time. When we finally learn that Trelane is a child at play, it's not so much a surprise as a fitting resolution, the other shoe dropping. Campbell finds the perfect emotional range for Trelane. He's superficially charming and gracious and insatiably curious, but it's the insistent, entitled curiosity of a spoiled child. He wants to know about you, and you're going to tell him whether you like it or not. He treats everything as a game, doesn't mind when people challenge or defy him, and only genuinely loses his temper when Kirk tries to end the game. That's the worst sin you could ever commit against Trelane. Tell him you don't want to play anymore. Trelane is obviously a precursor to the character of Q, who would come along about 20 years later in Star Trek The Next Generation. The characters are similar enough that Peter David even wrote a novel, Q Squared, that depicts Trelane as a member of the Q continuum. I haven't read it. I assume it's not bad since Peter David, but I don't like that idea. How does making Trelane a Q make him a more interesting character? How does it make sense within the context of Star Trek, where we know there are godlike beings causing trouble around every other corner? Are they all members of the Q continuum? Why would that be a good thing? There's a really unfortunate tendency among some fans of Star Trek and some writers of Star Trek stories as well to take things that are similar and establish that they're actually the same. So Trelane is a Q, and V'ger was modified by the Borg, and Gul Macet and Gul Dukat, the two Cardassian characters played by Mark Alimo, are identical cousins like it's the fucking Patty Duke show. This is sometimes described as a form of world building, but I think a better term for it is world shrinking, because it makes the world of the story seem smaller and flatter and less interesting. It sucks, and I don't care for it, but I digress. Trelane is part of a long mythological and literary tradition of tricksters and troublemakers. Loki, Puck. He reminds me a bit of Mr. Mxyzptlk, and obviously he's just one of many such characters who show up throughout the history of Star Trek, hence the theme of this batch of retro reviews. There's Q, of course, but he also shares certain traits in common with Charlie from Charlie X, which I won't be reviewing in this batch because I already reviewed it last year as part of the Orphans batch. Both Trelane and Charlie are godlike children who misuse their power due to their immaturity. The difference, I think, is that in the end, we're meant to feel bad for Charlie. He's the product of neglect, and he's only trying to make friends in his own misguided way. Trelane is entertaining, but he isn't sympathetic. He's a spoiled brat. That's why his comeuppance, though very similar to the end of Charlie X, is a lot more satisfying and a lot less emotionally fraught than Charlie's. Taking its cue from Trelane, the episode carries on with a tone that is mostly lighthearted, with hints of menace coming in along the edges. Trelane's world is inherently silly. It even erupts in cartoon sound effects when Kirk fires his pistol into the mirror. Clearly artificial, the soundstage forest outside Trelane's castle is never remotely convincing, nor do I think it's meant to be, and utterly nonsensical. Trelane is supposedly basing everything on observations of Earth 900 years in the past, but he also makes references to Napoleon and Alexander Hamilton, both of which would be hundreds of years too recent for Trelane to know about, but who really cares? Do you care? I don't care. It's not about precise details. It's about creating an impression. It's about a general idea. And that general idea provides the basis for an episode that is clever and goofy and enjoyable to watch despite its flaws. And perhaps, in the character of Trelane, we might also detect a hint of satire. He is, after all, someone with a tremendous amount of power, who wields it capriciously for his own benefit and amusement, threatening the lives and safety of those under his power, ultimately showing himself to be unworthy of such power and responsibility because he is, at heart, just a petulant, undisciplined child. He begs Captain Kirk to tell him stories of war and death, and he plays at such things himself because, to him, war and life and death are just games. I assume there were any number of prominent and powerful people who fit that general description when the episode was first broadcast in 1967, and I'm sure there are now. It's a bit of political commentary that sadly is as evergreen as the plastic trees decorating the grounds outside Trelane's castle. Those are my thoughts on the Squire of Gothos. What do you think of this episode? Please share your thoughts with me in the comments. If you'd like to support this channel And I sure wish you would if you can afford it. You can do so by becoming a patron at patreon.com/Steve Shives, becoming a channel member by clicking the join button, or by making a one-time gift by clicking the thanks button, or via PayPal or Venmo. Links are in the description. Please join me next time as this Gods and Monsters batch continues. We move on to Star Trek the Animated Series with a review of an episode titled The Magics of Magus 2. That's next time. See you then. Thanks for watching and take care, everybody.